Welcome to the broadcast, my old fruits. I hope you're having a lovely day. I'm rather crotchety today, and I beg you, don't ask me to calm down, and don't worry about it, relax, River, because when I get crotchety, I'm enjoying myself. I want to rant and rave. So, if you're not going to share in that enjoyment, I'd appreciate it if you vamoose and perhaps join me for a calmer broadcast. But I feel crotchety when the name of the Princess of Wales is taken into disrepute and aspersions are made about her character. And I've been receiving a flurry of comments about this. So I'm going to have to hold forth on it. And I'm going to have to hold forth on the subject of Prince Henry of Wales, who's been in the press with further revelations today and this week. So I'm going to have to go there. And I'm going to be talking about the Queen, whose name is Camilla, by the way. We need to get used to that. Not the late Queen Elizabeth, the Queen. We're going to be talking about her. Before we begin, let's just have a little palate cleanser to look at this wonderful image from yesterday of their Majesties leaving church at Crathy Kirk. Don't they look majestic there? Rather obscured photographs, but our Queen in emerald, and I know it's obscured, but I think she was wearing an amber gem as well, and it is just a tonic to see them getting on with their lives. No gaucheries, no Lady Bountiful trying to show us how it's done, no pother from the second boy, just grace and dignity. And then, in other business, we turn to the subject of Harry. Friends of the Sussexes have been claiming in the press that positive conversations took place between father and son shortly before Henry confirmed his attendance at the coronation. Well, first of all, if this is true, and I'm only saying if this is true, that friends have been talking to the press. Excuse me, why are they briefing the press? Why is it okay for the Montecitans to brief the press? Montecito Palace, but for Kensington Palace, Clarence, House, and all the palaces of the kingdom. Oh no, that's completely not cricket, my dear, but for everybody else it's acceptable. I don't understand that, do you? Perhaps they can explain. And these sources insist that they want to keep the contact private. So why are you talking about it? You call yourself friends of the Sussexes? Might it be because there was, I don't know, no apology that you demanded, my dears? That wasn't quite forthcoming? Even though you demanded accountability, conversations had to be had. Do you know? For one thing, we've learned over the last few weeks, according to Robert Jobson, that the late Queen Elizabeth swept Sandringham for bugs. For bugs. That's how much she trusted her bestie grandson. Yes. She roped in James Bond or wherever it was to crawl around on hands and knees. What an image. To get down there all dirty looking for bugs. And I'm not talking about creepy crawlies, my dear. There's only one creepy crawly at stake. Well, two actually. And that is the Earl and Countess of Dumbarton. Yes, it was swept for bugs. Do we really think that the king would divulge anything at all if he was at risk of espionage? No. I mean, we all know he's had his fingers burnt there before, haven't we? Those sausage fingers. He's had them burnt before with various recordings, and unfortunately he cannot even trust his own kin, because everything he says is weaponized. And that's why he could not just come out and say to you, Meghan is not coming while the late Queen Elizabeth is dying at Balmoral. She's not coming because we all loathe her and can't stand her and what she did along with you. No, he had to hedge his bets around the conversation, say, oh, darling boy, I don't think it would be convenient. We can't quite manage it. All kind of expostulation. He couldn't just come out and say it, A, because he knows that he's dealing with an insensible, Henry Insensible of Wales, Dumbarton and Kilkeel and Montecito. And secondly, he doesn't know and cannot trust that his speech is not being monitored, extrapolated and exploited, does he? More material for the sequel. And as for Henry demanding accountability from his family. It's an echo of Meghan on Oprah Winfrey. It's an echo because she got her apology from Catherine. She owned it. She was really nice about it. She brought me flowers for making me cry and sob. And she owned it. Kate owned it. Yeah, not the Duchess of Cambridge. Not even Catherine, but Kate. You know, Kate. You know, oh, Pally, Kate. Kitkins. Oh, kitty. Kate, she owned it. She owned it. The vulgarity overwhelming. Well, seems that Henry wants a bit of that pie. I need Big Willie to own it. Yeah, I bet you do, dear. I need Big Willie to own it, and Papa. I need Papa to own it for his darling boy. I don't think so, my dear. They might own Balmoral, Sandringham, and all the fineries of the kingdom, and several $billion, my dear, or I should say pounds, but one thing they will not own is accountability and subserviency. To you? I beg you do. And the reports that are emanating also seem to suggest that it is short shrift from the Prince of Wales, who does not want to engage in any phone calls whatsoever. He knows better. He knows better, I'm afraid. And at this point in time, he is not close to any coronation or crowning except his own father's, so those swords of justice and of mercy don't linger quite so close and hover above his head quite so nearby as they do for the poor mistreated Papa. So he can bide his time a bit more and can indulge that resentment, can't he? Because Catherine has been building resentment as well, according to Mr. Jobson, who is to release this tome, Our King. Catherine has been building resentment, so we hear, against Meghan because she was forced to stay away from Balmoral. Now, this is a new claim that's emerged this week. What Jobson tells us is that, yes, while the Queen, the late Queen Elizabeth, lay dying in bed and the family was summoned and rushed up to be by her side, he says that the King decided that Catherine would have to take the hit to smooth the passageways for Meghan's lack of visibility as the Queen lay dying, because they did not want Meghan to be there. Now, I don't know if this is true, but Jobson has some connections, and this is what he's claiming. He says, the decision was taken by Charles to ensure that Prince Harry did not have the excuse to bring his wife. And privately, he wanted to say that Meghan was not welcome, but he couldn't say that to Harry, so he personally intervened and asked Kate to stay back so that it was fair on Meghan, or seemed to be fair on Meghan. He says that Catherine had wanted to be with the Queen but wasn't able to. And do bear in mind, my dear, that the Duchess of Edinburgh appeared. She didn't make it in time. You know, this was in her previous role as Sophie Wessex. She didn't make it in time. Very sadly. Most of the family didn't make it in time. But she was included in the party. She was included. But now we turn on to the issue that has really rather irked me this week. And this question from Mano Fernando, thank you dear, represents one of many questions and comments that I received. I received a flurry of these in relation to comments that were passed by Tom Bower. River, I'm surprised how Tom Bower is accusing the Princess of Wales of being the influence behind Todger's wife's banning from the crowning. By saying such false things, Catherine is now being targeted with more vile stuff. Yes. Mano Fernando? Do you hear the drums, Fernando? Oh, I digress. Tom Bower claimed on GB News that we must all be grateful that Kate prevented Meghan from coming to the coronation, and he said that Catherine wouldn't have them there under any circumstances, and if Meghan did come, she'd have to sit at the back. This is what Tom Bower said. Now, I understand, as I understood things about Tom Bower when I read and reviewed his tome and did not recommend it, I understand that Tom Bower is being playful and mischievous and naughty, because Catherine has said no such thing. I understand that, and my problem and my issue isn't really with Tom Bower. If that's the way that he wants to play the game, so be it. He, as well as producing a very concise work in his tome that brought together everything that we already know. I mean, there were a few of you appreciated some conversations and some revelations that weren't exactly the great fireworks that everybody was expecting. And let it be known that not one allusion was made to any of the surrogacy theories, dolls, after all his exposition and digging and talking to everybody in the know. Not one conspiracy theory was even hedged at. Somebody said to me, but he refused to call them the children, Harry and Meghan's children, just Harry's children, as if that was some sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We know they're not really Meghan's children. Oh, come off. If he thought that there was any truth to any of those conspiracy theories, do you not think that he would have at least hedged around them or mentioned them? Well, he was afraid of getting sued. Well, if there's truth in it, he wouldn't be afraid of getting sued, would he? He would welcome being sued so that the lid could be lifted. People make all kinds of excuses, but I'm afraid what happened this week proved why I greeted that tome with a certain amount of cynicism, while appreciating what it did for those who don't have a wide introduction to the subjects of the Harkles and a lot of their mischief. So I appreciated it for what it was, but I understand some of his mischief, and I'm afraid with the power of a large audience, and his book sold like hotcakes, I should imagine, and I should imagine he's done very, very well out of that, and good for him. But he understands that, as well as the fact there are insensibles over at the Harkledom and their following, there is a faction of those who are not so favourable towards the Harkles that are also insensible. I have to deal with a few of them myself, I'm afraid. He knows that, and with the power and might of speaking to a lot of people that jive with you comes some sort of responsibility to understand that some of these people take what you say literally, don't realise you're being playful and mischievous. If I present to you a whisper or a rumour, I present it as a whisper or a rumour. And oftentimes, even if I know that it is going to press out to be true, for example, with one of the last whispers I gave you that Harry would attend the coronation and Meghan wouldn't, which I gave to you over a month ago, I coddled it in a caveat that this was just tittle-tattle. It was what I'd heard, take it or leave it, pinch of salt. And I do that intentionally because if something isn't a known fact, then I will not present it to you as one. And if I'm being playful, you'll know that I'm being playful. Hopefully. I mean, as I say, there are still some insensibles out there who take me very, very seriously, sitting here in my green scarf and grey, very elegant earrings and my turban dear and my opera gloves, who take me very, very seriously. But just to throw some clarity on the situation, and for anybody that is wondering, and I have to say that the vast majority of my basketeers are canny and savvy and get it, and I was very glad to receive comments like yours, Mano Fernando, and like every other comment that came in. None of them that I saw was asking me if what Tom Bower was saying with regards to Catherine making demands about the coronation. None of you were asking me if it was true, and perhaps I couldn't blame some of you for asking that, but I was very warmly encouraged to know that most of you got it instantly and understood that no, it is utterly unthinkable that the Princess of Wales, even if she thought it, because I do believe that she bears a lot of resentment towards the Duchess of Sussex, but she, like William, knows how to channel resentment and anger. We all experience human emotions, the undesirable ones. Well, I'm not even going to call them undesirable because, as I say, is a facet of humanity that we can't all radiate positivity and glories all of the time, can we, my dear? We have to embrace the full spectrum, but it's how we channel those on the darker end of the spectrum. It's how we channel. There are healthy ways and unhealthy ways. Wales, Sussex. Get it? Got it? Good. And I am telling you with every certainty that there is not a Catherine's chance in hell that she would even think about dictating to her father-in-law, who is about to be crowned, who is to attend his coronation. That would be uppity coming from anybody at all, or even for those in the cheap seats. But from Catherine? From Catherine to think that she would dare or deign to make those sort of feelings known? I don't think so, my dear, I ask you. But to wrap these thoughts up, I want to make it clear I don't have a problem per se with Mr. Bower, and I understand that he's being naughty, and I rather enjoy naughty people. In fact, they're my favourite kind of people, with the right kind of naughtiness. So you get that. I get the wink and a nudge, and that's why I like my basketeers and anybody who pops into the fruit basket and has a munch to receive me with a wink and a nudge, my dear. Everything is done with a wink, and I understand that about Mr. Bower as well. The trouble is that there are millions out there that don't understand that about Mr. Bower, and he knows that. So I feel that he let the side, if you want to call it, because I don't like making it into being about teams and sides, but I feel he rather let the side down there by putting those words into Princess Catherine's mouth. That's not royal, that's not graceful, and it's not cricket, my dear. So let's have less of that, my dear. Let's have less of that. That's all I ask. And for another little palate cleanser before we progress, a recipe for the coronation quiche has been announced by Buckingham Palace. This is personally chosen by their majesties, this recipe that's been shared in a celebration of the big lunches, similar to what we saw at the Jubilee. There's going to be lots of big lunches taking place all over the kingdom during the coronation, and this is a suggested recipe, and there's been images and a video of it being made. It features spinach, broad beans, cheese, and tarragon. Yum, yum, yum. And the recipe, if you want to whip it up, can be found on the royal website and on their social media. There are certain rumours circulating that Prince Harry is dreading a face-off of a kind at the coronation with his stepmother, Queen Camilla. His arche-nemesis, if you will, his arche-rival. And I've been thinking about this a little bit, you know. She was disparaged in the tome, as you know. Now, the words that were used around Camilla in the tome were words like wicked, dangerous, and her personal ambition left bodies in the streets. And I've got to say, the press have been making a lot about this, including rehashing it this week. Now, this is where I think that I am a little bit more fair, because I read that tome and those words in context were not literally describing Camilla. He didn't literally say that she was wicked, that she was dangerous, that she left bodies in the streets. When you read it, it was in a different context. He wasn't using those adjectives. It was more about alluding to the public perception. But I do understand, and I can see that it was careless to throw those words into the mix surrounding her, because he knows that is what the press are going to lift anyway and will associate with her. His suggestions were that her campaign for public support somehow were underhand and mischievous. That was more hurtful, in my opinion, because he said things like he and his image, I'm paraphrasing, were sacrificed on her personal PR altar. Now that stuff, yes, that is where I can understand that he came for her, all guns blazing, unshielded, if you will, my dear. And he most certainly misrepresented the story about leaks coming from Camilla about her meeting when she first met William. The very first time she met William, Harry claimed in his tome that it was Camilla that was responsible. William was furious at her, all these kind of things. Well, as we know, and hopefully you know by now, that was complete and utter insensibility. It was complete and utter tosh from this Earl of Tudge. It was Mandy McManus who took responsibility. It was Mandy McManus in 1998 who was working for the Duchess of Cornwall, as she was, that admitted and took responsibility for the fact that she brought home that information that Camilla had met William, told her husband. That was her mistake. She confided in her husband, who was working at the Times, not the New York Times, the Times here in England, a reputable newspaper, told him, and then it was him that went on to confide in a third party who didn't even work in the media, wasn't a journalist, and it was that third party that went on to pass the information to the Sun tabloid. So it was leaked to the press, but not by Camilla. It was one of Camilla's most trusted advisors and confidants, and she held her hands up. She resigned, and she made a public statement announcing this. So there's no question. And it would take somebody very harsh, very cynical, totally unfair to put that blame squarely on Camilla's shoulders. Do you see how she's mispresented? Yes, it went through Camilla to this close confidant, who, by the way, was reinstated and only resigned a couple of years ago in the fullness of time. A beloved associate of Camilla's, but like all of us, I'm afraid she whispered a little too loudly in the wrong ear. She trusted her hubby trusted someone else. Yes, it was a mistake, but she took responsibility for it, and most people would understand that it would. Yes, I suppose you could say ultimately the responsibility came down to Camilla, but then could she really have hidden that private meeting with William from one of her very closest companion advisors, more like a private secretary, PA? Could that really have been hidden? Who knows? But that was how it was presented for the world to see, all these millions of readers all over the globe who are new to matters royal and are just turning up for the celebrity factor that he and his wife have ushered in over the recent years. They don't realise, they don't see the story behind the story until folk like me and people in the press come and have to correct them. Do you understand? Do you understand the importance of why some of us feel the need to speak up? Because if some of us didn't, and I'm not just referring to me, by the way, there's plenty of people doing it on whatever platform or whatever media, but if we'd been cowed into some sort of silence, there would be no counter-argument anywhere, because people would just be swallowing this up, all this nonsense on stilts. But it is my personal opinion that I have reached, in tandem with a collection of very helpful intimates with associations, close associations, it is my opinion that Harold has become petrified of her trajectory in the discourse of public opinion, which is the complete opposite of his experience. When you think about it, it's very interesting, especially as we know that she is his arch-nemesis and arche-rival. His public appeal, the hail fellow well met, the lovable rogue, the adorable oik. I was never endeared to him, but for some reason he was popular. His appeal, my dear, nosediving. In descent, free falling, the more noise he makes, that's a funny thing. When he was forced to be quiet and forced to shut up and forced to NCNE, never complain, never explain, NCNE, he was forced to do that. Well, it worked, didn't it? Because everybody loved him. And as soon as the chatter came out, under the tutorship, but the willing tutorship, he wanted it. It's not really her fault. She was just the agency for his own toxic concoction. As soon as he started blabbing, didn't take long, did it, to go the other way. Camilla, on the other hand, Her Majesty, has done the unthinkable in the opposite direction. The most loathed, reviled woman in Britain. And by the way, that story of her having bread rolls chucked at her in a supermarket, it's oft repeated I even find it in my comment section somehow she had to put up with that. She had to put up with a hell of a lot, more than most people could handle, and what would drive most people mad, and much more than the Duchess of Sussex put up with. But of course, her abuse involved allegations of racism, unconscious bias, so it's so much worse for her. So she says, well, it would be if those things were involved, but those things were trace. There was trace element of them, my dear, so I don't buy that. But Camilla was far more widely disparaged, but that story about the bedrolls was actually not true. It's a myth. It's a myth. But she never spoke about it. Do you see? If it was Harry or Meghan, they would have had to come forward, make some correction, put it forward. And you'll think, well, who can blame them for wanting to correct a story? It's because tried and tested and trusted, the palace advisors know that you don't indulge that kind of tawdry gossip. Tawdry gossip will always exist no matter what you do, no matter who you try to shut down. Camilla's approach epitomizes. Never complain, never explain. Never, do you hear me? Never. Never. Not once in all these decades did she moan, whinge, not even an archy eyebrow, my dear. Nothing. She just got on with it. And what happened? Nobody liked her. Then, begrudgingly, she was tolerated. Oh, she's here to stay. Then the tolerance became a little bit more congenial. And over the past few years, that tolerance has turned into rather a penchant, rather a liking, and actually, oh, she's okay. And very recently, it's actually become rather fawning and rather deferential. And if you don't believe me, you can have a look on social media. And you might say, oh, but everybody on royal social media is going to support the royals. Well, I remember a few years ago on social medias, on places like Facebook, whenever a photograph was flashed up of Camilla, and I'm talking like in fairly recent years, it would be disparagement. Now, and not just on official accounts, so it's not that they're being edited or removed, especially now it is. The tide has turned. The tide has turned, and not just with royal fans. The public at large, even those who don't really care about royalty, they might not have that much of an opinion on Camilla, but the hatred, the spite is not there for her. You know, I realise that some people harbour very old grudges on Diana's behalf and don't like her, even some of the fruits in this basket. But, you know, they're sour fruits, to be honest, my dear. And, you know, we all like to suck a sour fruit from time to time, but you wouldn't want them overbearing on your diet, would you, my dear? Not on your daily diet. But, you know, I like a bit of lemon in my gin, so I understand a bit of it, but not for breakfast. So not only will Harold Sussex have to witness the crowning of his father, but also the holy anointing and the crowning of his arch-nemesis, his arche-rival, Camilla, the arche-rival for his father's affections, and darling boy, he has been replaced and deposed by my darling wife. And that hasn't gone down very well with him, has it? Jealousy! You know, I've said it before and I will say it again. Harry's latent homosexuality is rumoured, and I'm afraid I don't hold to that opinion. I don't see it. I haven't heard any whispers regarding it. I'm not convinced that it exists, but I could certainly be convinced, and I've said it before and I will say it again, I could be convinced that daddy issues are a potential possibility, daddy issues, and that while I feel that the boy is not a latent homosexual, there is potential for cravings towards papa. I don't know how. I'm going to remain delicate in nature, I'm afraid, because I don't want to go there during this broadcast, but you know, I think it's a case of I want you to want me, papa. I want you to want me. I want to hold me in your cosy embrace, Papa, with those warm, large hands and those elephantine fingers. I want to be in your embrace, not Big Willie, but me, your little Harold, Father, my Papa. I want to be your darling boy. Oh, please let me be your darling boy. Oh, Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. I'm just talking about terms of endearment, terms of affection, my dear. He wants to be darling boy, not darling Camilla. I've got sympathy for that boy because of many things. The untimely death of the late Diana being one of them. So enormous sympathy. And I have enormous sympathy for the fact that he's going to have to sit at that coronation and think about what could have been. And genuinely, for a moment, I'm not being, I'm not trying to be sarcastic here. The fact that he's going to have to look there and imagine, that it could have been Queen Diana. I mean, I don't even want to linger on that thought because it is a sad thought, and to think about how fabulous, as fabulous as I think Camilla is, how fabulous Diana could have been if things were different, if it was a healthy marriage, if. That's not how life played out, is it? That was not her story. It wasn't. I've come to terms with that. And it's got to be just as hard for William, of course, on that day. That he does not help himself to exorcise those demons. That ghost, he does not help himself, does he, my dears? This is the trouble. And it's a rum do. It's a rum do. Will he avenge the moment? This is the question. It's best for all concerned if there are no cameras trained on the Duke of Sussex during that ceremony, in my opinion. I actually think that the palace should arrange that. And I'm not talking about obscuring them with the yellow candles they did for Meghan, getting completely out of view. Sit him somewhere where there'll be no cameras, because at that moment of Camilla's crowning, you can just imagine the twitching on the face, can't you? Who knows what the boy's capable of? But he's been under the tutelage of the Duchess. He's been under the tutelage of the Countess of Dumbarton for the last few years. So he will be taking tips from her, won't he? How to try and pull focus and control the narrative. And this was rather unusual because some close friends of Camilla spoke to the Times. Again, I'm speaking about the Times newspaper in the kingdom, not any New York Times. One of the Queen's companions that we've spoken about just recently, Lady Lansdowne, she is godmother to Camilla's daughter, so she ain't just anybody. And by the way, I shouldn't really divulge this to you, especially, well, no, I shouldn't. It's a bit naughty, but I'm going to tell you, by the way, that more than one of the Queen's companions that we've discussed recently, more than one of them is a fruity and is probably watching this broadcast right now. You're in very good company, behind the scenes. Various people that have contacted me, and also family members of various family members, would blow you away. Perhaps one day I'll be able to divulge a little bit more, but for obvious reasons, a veil must be drawn. But you are in really good company, and so are they, because you're fabulous as well. But you know what I mean, my dear. You know what I mean. But more than one of Queen Camilla's companions watches this show, this very show, my dear. Quite a few people that surround the Queen. Lady Lansdowne, by the way, has never spoken publicly before. She speaks of how tough the 90s were for Camilla, and she had no protection. None. And Lady Lansdowne often had to offer refuge to Camilla and take her in together with the children. There were times, when the press were squeezed up against the windows and all over their private properties. But Lady Lansdowne says, but she is resilient. She was brought up with this extraordinary sense of duty where you got on with it, don't whinge, put your best face on and keep going. And it has stood her in very good stead. It was horrible at times, but her sense of humour and knowing she had her girlfriends around her got her through. And that's one of the many reasons that I've fallen for Camilla over the years. It's that sense of humour. It's delicious. It's delicious. It's conspiratorial, it's cosy, it's gossipy, but always royal, always knows its boundary and its limits. with those twinkling dancing eyes that she has. Wonderful. And that's not a comparison against Anna as well, because God knows that she was certainly a fun gal, but she was the kind of gal that will ghost you. You know, you're having fabulous fun 1 minute, the next minute ghosted. And sometimes should be fairly quick to forgive, you know, with her relationship with Fergie, for example. Friends, not friends, you know. Fergie admits that. Diana wasn't speaking to lots of her friends when she died, whether it be Elton John or Fergie, you know, take your pick, my dear. It's not to say that it would have remained that way. I don't think she held grudges forever. She didn't, but that was her. Camilla is not so much like that. She doesn't play those kind of games, but she can certainly put the freeze on. Especially, it has to be said, for those that get too close to Charles, his surrounding advisors and confidants. She has a steely side. You remember Charles's former advisor and close confidant, Michael Fawcett, who was forced to stop working with Charles last year. Well, he had worked his way up from basically squeezing out Prince Charles's toothpaste and valeting for Charles, worked his way up to chief executive of his enterprises and organisations and of his foundation. Well, Camilla, it is said, mercilessly pursued him out of, because she didn't like the fact that he had Charles's ear so readily, and made very convincing arguments to Charles. She likes to be that person. So I'm not saying that she's too pure to be pink, and I wouldn't want her to be, you know. She can put on the deep freeze, she can. But it has to be said that Charles's interests are always at her top priority. And if it would be in his favour for him to have certain people around, she would encourage it and be enthusiastic for it. But she is not afraid to turn on the chill and the icy winds when needs be. And that's an elemental balancing that I think is healthy in one's nature. You know, she can be the warm, crackling hearth of a cosy fire, but if that icy gust of wind is required, she can and she will. It's queenly. The Times also quotes a very close source, a former staffer of Camilla, who says that Camilla never actively campaigned for the title of Queen. So this also runs askance to Harry's claims that she is so fiercely ambitious. Her ambition is actually for her husband to do well, for her to dwell in love with Charles and to promote everything that is beneficent about him and to him, because she understands her role is to bolster him in their, I hesitate to say twilight years, because they're still so full of vibrancy and energy that I see no twilight. Sometimes you can sense twilight in a 50-year-old or even a 45-year-old, but they've entered winter, the very early months of winter, but I see no sign of the twilight setting in, and they're full of the energy of early winter, which is very encouraging and very reassuring. But she does understand that it is winter and that he has so much to do. He hasn't even been crowned yet, as the oldest monarch of all time in this country. The oldest crowned monarch of all time. He's got so much to do, and he will be able to do it because he's looked after himself in a lot of ways. Even though he's battered and bruised, he's back sore, you know, as Harry tells us and has informed the entire world. He's even gotten down to his knickerbockers and done headstands in his bedroom to try and cure his discs and the problems with his back, his great big sausage fingers, God knows what else. He's got all his polo injuries. He's a wreck in many ways, but he looks fine, doesn't he? He looks hearty and healthy of constitution because he goes walking every single day, tries to do it for an hour. He gets out there in the fresh air. He's looked after himself for us, and at the age when most people are settling down, retiring. He is just about to begin the role that he was born for. And what I tried to tell you is she understands that, and she wants to be his sucker. So she has to put her needs first in order to put his needs a very close second, if that makes sense. But this ex-staffer that worked with Camilla said and told the Times that Camilla never instructed me to do anything to advance the argument about whether or not she would be queen or queen consort or princess consort. It was never a role that she actually campaigned for. And again, by the way, this is the antithesis of Harry and Meghan's strategy, isn't it? His epic campaign commencing when they left the kingdom and on Oprah. And it was a campaign designed not only to enhance his own image and the image of his wife, but also to ensure that their spawn would receive their prince and princessly titles. Campaigning. Don't judge everybody by your own standards. Harold. And back to Lady Lansdowne, her friend, who also revealed that Camilla has strong views and is being vocal during rehearsals for the coronation and the build-up to it, Her grandchildren, as we've said, are going to be there, but, they're going to be carrying her train as well, which is very nice, and it's going to represent or demonstrate that they are a blended family, a blended family, rather. Lady Lansdowne says that she's been firm on the guest list. She's fiercely loyal to friends, and that will be reflected in who goes to the big day. She wants to be loyal to the people who have stood by her. Loyalty means a lot. And another way that Camilla showed her natural ability to be rather savvy and canny is the way that she has enchanted and wooed her former critics, not only in the population general, but also in the world of media and journalists. Because it makes a difference, the personal relationships you establish, especially if you have the ability to do it while also keeping them at arm's length, as she has, because journalists find her to be very easy company. One of the moments that exemplifies this is when President Trump was visiting and she gave a little naughty wink to the photographers. And it wasn't a disparagement to the President Trump, because she wouldn't do that. She is royal. It was merely to throw some levity on a subject that was bringing up a lot of drama at the time, and to bring people in and show a dash of humanity when her husband has to get on with very royal and regal business. It's moments like that that endear the press to her. She brings them in without giving everything away and doesn't treat them as if they are just trash. And, some factions of the press probably are trash, but unlike Harry, she understands that they have a job to do. It's just a more elegant way of playing her hand. Yes, it is still a game for her, just as it's a game for Harry, but there are ways to play the game without resorting to being complete and utter tawdry cabaret trash. And Lady Lansdowne was asked about how Spare made Camilla feel. Lady Lansdowne says it was not a stamping of feet or a gnashing of the teeth. It was much more of an eye roll response. Harold again. Of course it bothers her, it hurts, but she doesn't let it get to her. Her philosophy is always, don't make a thing of it and it will settle down. Least said, soonest mended. No fuss, you see. No fuss. Compared to much fuss and much ado about nothing. From old Romeo and Juliet, star-crossed lovers. Well, that's enough mischief from me, isn't it, my dears? Thank you for joining me. I'll catch up with you in the next broadcast. Leave me a nice juicy comment, and my privy purse is in the description box if you fancy treating me. Thank you so much, my dears. Take care and have a wonderful, wonderful day, my dears. Ta-ra!